Stand on the north bank of the Thames today, and you can see glass towers rising where Roman soldiers once built their fortress. Over 9 million people call this metropolis home, speaking 300 languages across 32 boroughs. But rewind 2,000 years, and you would have found nothing but marshland and Celtic settlement scattered along a river that flooded twice daily with the tide. Conquest. Fire. Plague. Empire. Using cutting-edge AI reconstruction, we are about to walk you through every century of London's story, from a muddy Roman outpost to the global city you can visit today. The story begins in 43 AD when 4 Roman legions crossed the Channel under Emperor Claudius. They needed a crossing point on the Thames, close enough to the sea for supply ships yet narrow enough to bridge. The site they chose sat on 2 low gravel hills above the marshes, where the river could be forded at low tide. Within a decade, wooden wharves lined the waterfront and timber-framed shops clustered along gravel streets. The Romans called it Londinium. By 60 AD, the settlement had grown into a bustling trading hub with a population approaching 30,000, merchants from Gaul, soldiers from Germania, and native Britons drawn by opportunity. Then Boudicca burned it all. The Iceni Queen's revolt left Londinium a field of ash so thick that archaeologists still find a red oxidized layer 18 inches below modern streets. But Rome rebuilt in stone. The new Londinium rose with a basilica longer than St. Paul's Cathedral, a forum that could hold 10,000 citizens, an amphitheater where gladiators fought for crowds 6,000 strong, and a wall that enclosed 330 acres, a perimeter that would define the city's core for the next 15 centuries. Bathhouses heated by hypercaust furnaces offered hot plunges and cold pools. Imported wine from Campania filled amphorae stacked in riverside warehouses. A bridge spanned the Thames on oak pilings driven 15 feet into the riverbed, connecting Londinium to the road network that stretched all the way to Rome itself. For 3 centuries, this was Britannia's capital, the city where Latin inscriptions decorated temple pediments and where a governor's palace overlooked the river with walls painted in Pompeian red. When the legions withdrew in 410 AD, Londinium did not vanish overnight. But without imperial administration, the stone buildings crumbled into quarries. The aqueducts dried. Silt choked the wharves. For 2 centuries, the old Roman city stood largely abandoned, a ghost town of toppled columns and vine-covered walls. The new Saxon settlers avoided the ruins, building their timber halls a mile to the west in a place they called Lundenwic, meaning London Trading Town. Archaeological excavations beneath Covent Garden and the Strand have uncovered the post holes of Saxon buildings, the bone combs and pottery fragments of a community that thrived from 600 to 850 AD. Lundenwic became a major port for the emerging Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Ships from Francia and the Rhineland docked along the riverbank, trading Frankish glass and millstones for English wool and slaves. The Venerable Bede, writing in 731, described Lundenwic as a trading centre for many nations who visit it by land and sea. But the Vikings came. Danish longships began raiding the Thames estuary in the 830s, and by 871, the Great Heathen Army had made Lundenwic unlivable. King Alfred the Great recaptured the settlement in 886 and made a pivotal decision: abandon the indefensible sprawl of Lundenwic and resettle within the old Roman walls. The ancient fortifications still stood, moss-covered and cracked, but they could be repaired. Alfred's engineers restored the gates, rebuilt the ramparts, and laid out a new street grid within the walls. This was the birth of the City of London, a fortified square mile that would endure as the heart of English commerce for the next millennium. The Saxons called the restored city Londonburg. Wooden houses with thatched roofs crowded along narrow lanes. A new wooden bridge replaced the collapsed Roman span. Churches rose on Roman foundations. St. Paul's Cathedral was founded in 604, rebuilt after the Viking Wars, and rebuilt again after every disaster that followed. By the time of Edward the Confessor in the 1040s, London had regained its status as England's wealthiest and most populous city. William the Conqueror arrived in 1066 and immediately recognized London's importance. He granted the city a charter confirming its ancient rights, then built the White Tower to dominate its skyline, 90 feet of Curran limestone that served as fortress, palace, and prison. The Tower of London became the symbol of Norman power, a keep so formidable that it was never taken by assault in 900 years of existence. Medieval London exploded beyond the Roman walls. Suburbs sprawled east toward the docks and west toward the royal palace at Westminster, which Edward the Confessor had built 2 miles upriver to escape the city's noise and stench. By 1300, the population had surged past 80,000, making London the largest city in England and one of the great urban centres of Christendom. The Thames was the city's highway. Over 3,000 wherries ferried passengers between the banks, and London Bridge, the only stone crossing for hundreds of miles, became a city unto itself. Completed in 1209 after 33 years of construction, the bridge carried houses and shops for stories tall, a chapel at its centre where travellers stopped to pray, and 20 arches through which the Thames roared with such force that shooting the rapids was considered an act of bravery. Traitors' heads decorated the southern gatehouse, spiked on poles as a warning to all who entered. Medieval London was a city of guilds and parishes. The worshipful company of mercers controlled the cloth trade. The fishmongers held a monopoly on Thames catches. The goldsmiths clustered along Cheapside, the city's commercial heart, where their signs swung above streets barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass. 110 parish churches served neighbourhoods so tightly packed that you could hear your neighbour's confession through the walls. The city stank of tanneries and slaughterhouses, of open sewers running in channels down the centre of every street, of coal smoke that blackened the limestone of Westminster Abbey. Then the Black Death arrived in 1348, carried by ship-borne rats from the Mediterranean. London lost half its population in 18 months. Bodies filled plague pits at Smithfield and Spitalfields faster than priests could bless them. The city that had taken 3 centuries to build emptied in a single season. But London recovered. It always did. By 1400, migrants from the countryside had refilled the empty houses. The Hanseatic League established a trading post called the Stiliard along the river. Italian bankers from Lombardy opened counting houses that gave their name to Lombard Street. Flemish weavers brought their looms to Spitalfields. The city became a crossroads of European commerce, a place where you could buy pepper from the Indies, silk from Cathay, and furs from Muscovy, all on the same morning at the docks below the tower. The 16th century brought England into the Renaissance, and London transformed from a medieval port into the engine of an emerging empire. Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries in the 1530s, and their lands became building sites for aristocratic palaces. The great religious houses that had occupied a quarter of the walled city were carved into tenements and workshops. Population doubled to 200,000 by 1600. The first theatres rose in Southwark, beyond the reach of Puritan city authorities. The Globe Theatre opened in 1599 with William Shakespeare as part owner and resident playwright. Audiences of 3,000 packed the yard to watch Hamlet and King Lear performed in the open air, their applause mingling with the shouts of bear-baiters in the adjacent pit. The Royal Exchange opened in 1571, modelled on the Bourse in Antwerp, providing merchants with a covered courtyard where deals could be struck whatever the weather. Coffee houses spread through the city in the 1650s, becoming centres of news and debate. Lloyd's Coffee House on Tower Street became the birthplace of the marine insurance industry when shipowners began meeting there to share risk on overseas ventures. But Stuart London was also a city of catastrophes. Civil war raged from 1642 to 1651, with London backing Parliament against the King. The Great Plague of 1665 killed 100,000 Londoners, 1 in 4 residents. Red crosses marked infected houses, and carts rumbled through the night collecting bodies as searchers called out, "Bring out your dead." Then came the fire. On Sunday, September 2nd, 1666, a spark from Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane ignited the timber and thatch of the old city. An east wind drove the flames west. For 4 days, fire devoured 80% of the walled city, 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, and the medieval St. Paul's Cathedral, whose lead roof melted and ran molten through the streets. Samuel Pepys watched from a tower and described an infinite great fire that turned the Thames into one entire arch of fire. When the flames finally died, 80,000 Londoners were homeless. But from the ashes rose a new city. Christopher Wren designed 51 replacement churches, each with a distinctive steeple that punctuated the skyline. His masterpiece was the new St. Paul's Cathedral, a Renaissance dome visible from every approach to the city, completed in 1711 after 35 years of construction. The streets were widened. Buildings were required by law to be brick or stone. The medieval Warren became a Georgian city of straight lines and classical proportions. London was rebuilt, fireproof, orderly, and ready to become the capital of a worldwide empire. The 18th and 19th centuries saw London explode into the largest city on Earth. The population passed 1 million by 1810, 2 million by 1840, and 6.5 million by 1900, a pace of growth unmatched in human history. The docks expanded relentlessly eastward. The West India Docks opened in 1802 with 30 acres of water enclosed by 20-foot walls to deter thieves. The London Docks, the Surrey Docks, the Royal Albert Docks, each a self-contained world of warehouses, cranes, and dock workers unloading the goods of empire: tea from India, sugar from the Caribbean, timber from Canada, wool from Australia. London became the financial capital of the world. The Bank of England, founded in 1694, issued the pound sterling that underwrote global trade. The London Stock Exchange standardized the buying and selling of shares. By 1850, half the world's trade in goods was financed through London banks, and British ships carried 60% of the world's seaborne commerce. Victorian London was a city of staggering contrasts. The West End glittered with gaslit squares and stuccoed terraces where aristocrats attended balls in Mayfair and Belgravia. The East End festered in rookeries where entire families shared single rooms, where cholera epidemics killed thousands, where children worked 14-hour shifts in factories and bone-boiling yards. Charles Dickens walked these streets and filled his novels with their poverty and resilience. Henry Mayhew interviewed the costermongers and mudlarks, documenting a parallel city invisible to the wealthy. The Industrial Revolution transformed the city's infrastructure. The world's first underground railway opened in 1863, the Metropolitan Railway, running steam trains through gaslit tunnels beneath the streets. Passengers choked on sulphurous smoke but marveled at the speed: Baker Street to Farringdon in 18 minutes. Within 30 years, the tube expanded into a web of deep-level lines bored through London clay, powered by electricity, connecting suburbs that sprawled in every direction. The city swallowed villages whole: Kensington, Hampstead, Clapham, Greenwich, absorbing them into an urban sprawl that stretched 10 miles from centre to edge. The Thames was London's sewer. Every rainstorm washed the filth of 3 million people directly into the river. The Great Stink of 1858 drove Parliament from Westminster. Members fled the chamber with handkerchiefs over their faces, unable to breathe the stench. Joseph Bazalgette responded with the greatest engineering project of the Victorian age: 82 miles of interceptor sewers, brick-lined tunnels large enough to walk through, that captured the city's waste and carried it downstream. His embankments reclaimed land from the Thames, creating the Victoria Embankment and the Chelsea Embankment, riverside promenades lined with plane trees and cast-iron benches. Bazalgette's sewers still serve London today. The 20th century tested London as never before. The First World War brought Zeppelin raids, the first aerial bombing of a capital city in history. Londoners grew accustomed to searchlights sweeping the sky and the crump of bombs falling on the East End. But the Blitz of 1940 to 1941 was apocalypse. From September 7, 1940, the Luftwaffe bombed London for 57 consecutive nights. Incendiary bombs ignited firestorms in the docks. High-explosive bombs collapsed entire streets. St. Paul's Cathedral survived surrounded by flames in an image photographed by Herbert Mason that became a symbol of British defiance. 43,000 civilians died. 1 million houses were damaged or destroyed. Children were evacuated to the countryside. Londoners slept in tube stations. 30,000 people packed onto platforms and tracks while trains ran a limited service overhead. When the war ended in 1945, vast tracts of the city lay in ruins. Post-war Reconstruction reshaped London again. The Festival of Britain in 1951 celebrated recovery with a futuristic exhibition on the South Bank. Tower blocks rose in place of bomb terraces, brutalist estates like the Barbican and Trellick Tower that aimed to create streets in the sky, but often created isolation instead. The docks declined as container shipping moved downriver to Tilbury, leaving miles of derelict warehouses. London's population actually fell in the 1960s and 1970s as industry departed and inner-city neighborhoods decayed. Then came reinvention. The Docklands regeneration of the 1980s turned abandoned wharves into Canary Wharf, a new financial district with skyscrapers rivaling Manhattan. The Thames Barrier, completed in 1982, protected the city from the tidal surges that had repeatedly flooded low-lying neighborhoods. Immigration from the Commonwealth brought Jamaicans to Brixton, Bangladeshis to Whitechapel, and West Africans to Peckham, transforming London into one of the world's most multicultural cities. The 2012 Olympics showcased the transformation, a regenerated East End hosting athletes from 204 nations. The city that had been bombed to rubble 70 years earlier now welcomed the world. Stand in the City of London today, and you can trace 2,000 years in a single glance. Roman wall fragments survive beneath medieval churches. Wren steeples punctuate a skyline dominated by glass towers. Victorian railway vaults house craft breweries. The Thames flows past Roman quays, Georgian embankments, and postmodern footbridges. Over 9 million people call Greater London home, a population larger than at any point in the city's history, living in a metropolis that refuses to stop evolving. From Londinium to the megacity, this is the story of a place that burned, flooded, was bombed to ruins, and rebuilt itself every time. The city that will not die. London endures.